Hi, welcome to the Business of Apps with George Osborne. In this video, I'm going to be running through the iOS 8 marketing features that you can end up finding on the iPhone as a result of Apple's latest software update. So what's the reason for going through this? Well, it's pretty simple actually. Every single time Apple updates the phone, they bring in incremental fixes and they make changes to the ecosystem to make a number of different things work better for users, for consumers, and for app developers to make sure that people can just enjoy basically using their iPhone as much as possible. And in particular, one of the major things that's been developed over the last few years are improved ways of helping people to discover apps that they really want. And so in this video, I'm just going to be basically guiding you through all of those things, or as many of them as we've found, to let you know where perhaps users could end up discovering your apps in the future. So the number one place that users are going to probably end up finding their apps, it's of course going to be the App Store. And in there's been quite a few substantial and interesting changes this year that are definitely worth hearing about. So we'll just open up the App Store. And as it loads up, you're going to end up seeing that basically there's a variety of apps. You can see that the editorial approach that Apple has been taking is basically being continued. You know, there's different apps scrolling across the top, the best new apps, the best new games, app of the week, etc. But what's particularly interesting are these app previews. So app previews are one of the major introductions to iOS 8. They're basically 15 to 30 second long marketing clips that you show off your app in an interesting new light. And as you can see, Apple's pushing these quite hard and basically getting a variety of them put on the front page as both a way of discovering games and apps, and both as just a way of showing off the feature itself. And so just to quickly show off the feature, here's the trailer for Nova Free by Gameloft, and this will show you hopefully why video is perhaps an interesting and dynamic new format to be using during your app marketing. So that was a very macho trailer there, wasn't it, for Nova Free? But when you think about it, in the context of who Gameloft are trying to appeal to, they're trying to appeal to hardcore gamers who've probably played the likes of Halo, Crysis, maybe Call of Duty on console as well. And I think that when you watch that app trailer, you'll see it's a really interesting and dynamic way of appealing to those players who kind of expect those big, loud, bang, shooty kind of games to have a really dramatic trailer to go with it. But while app previews are one of the major introductions to iOS 8, they're far from the only thing that you're going to find different in the App Store. One of the major ones is down here, and it's basically bundles. So if you're a paid app developer and you're looking for a way to more innovatively sell your app, a paid app bundle is a great way of doing it. And so basically, as we click on through and see what's in there, app bundles basically allow you to put together a variety of apps, whether they're games, whether they're a type of utility, put them together, put a price on them as a special discount, and sell them as one. So instead of you basically having to sit there and hope that you can sell all of your games individually, you can put a bit of a discount out there and end up getting people to buy them at a bargain price. So what you can see is the likes of Infinity Blade, Worms Trilogy, the Lego games, Cut the Rope, Angry Birds. But beyond that, you can also see a variety of kids games, and of course you can see some app bundles up here, such as the Stargazer pack. And what it basically offers people is an interesting way of selling their apps. Perhaps it's a bit disappointing that Apple haven't allowed developers to team up, across Apple accounts and maybe offer some sort of themed bundle together, but it's a good start for paid app developers who are willing to maybe trade off a little bit of revenue in return for the kind of sales that you normally get with something like a Humble Bundle on Steam. But beyond that's far from the only thing that's basically in there. I mean, there's Metal, which of course is enhancing games, but perhaps isn't too relevant here. And perhaps what's more relevant here is extensions for your apps. So what is an app extension? Well, essentially, it's an app that extends the functionality of your phone beyond just simply that app itself. So instead of it being, say, self-contained, a bit like, Citymap or Google Maps, these extensions will basically add something extra to the rest of your phone's ecosystem. So perhaps the best known example is the likes of SwiftKey, which is basically a predictive text keyboard, which you can use across all of your apps. And that's a really good example of basically one of the sort of functionalities that Apple is encouraging developers to plug into more. But perhaps more interestingly than that is the notification center widgets. And this is really interesting for app developers because if you can work out a way of creating a really interesting notification center widget, then if your app is considered that essential by users, you can basically market to them in a way that's a lot less intrusive than a push notification, and it's in fact something they've chosen to include. So a notification center widget will end up bumping up into your notification center, which you can obviously drop down from the top of the screen. And once people have started to install that, well, that could be a particularly useful or particularly interesting way of actually marketing to people in the long run. And then lastly, Apple are extending it out, so they're including things like photo editors and sharing options and sharing tools. And while I probably wouldn't argue that those are truly app extensions, it seems to be that this is kind of part of a concerted move to offer people ways of basically extending the functionality of their individual apps, which is very good for anyone who's looking to create one of those third-party services that people can use across a variety of apps. And so that's really it for the featured charts. But if we carry on looking through the rest of the App Store, you can see that there's changes elsewhere. So if we look in the top charts, ultimately nothing much has really changed. You've got the paid, you've got the free, and you've got the top grossing, which are right here. And while there have been some minor changes, particularly to the free search algorithm, the major changes come in paid. And it's not actually that major a change. If we scroll through, I'll end up showing you what it is quite quickly. So as you basically scroll down, you can see there are all of these paid apps and particularly paid games. But after a while, once we keep on scrolling, we'll eventually stumble across one. Well, I hope we will anyway. We'll essentially come across one of them at some point very soon, such as now, the Angry Birds Ultimate Slingshot bundle. And so bundles are charting in the top page, so this means that you can feature them in there. And there's some interesting things in here. So for example, it's got all of the screenshots of Angry Birds Star Wars, it's got all the screenshots from Angry Birds Seasons as well, but not all of the screenshots of all of the games. You get double the amount of screenshots to advertise potentially more games. So you've got an interesting sort of pros and cons thing to go there. And interestingly, it doesn't currently develop the review score, but if you look at an app bundle, you can actually write a review of an app bundle nevertheless. So that's perhaps more interesting to those paid game developers who are particularly looking at the top charts. But beyond that, there are some interesting new changes anyway. So the Explore section I think is particularly interesting. When you look at it, it looks kind of familiar to perhaps how we've seen it before. It's not quite the same. Explore used to be much more focused around what was happening in your nearby geographic area, but I think Apple have realised that's kind of useless. And instead they've refocused it around categories. But whereas previously we've kind of come to expect that within each of these individual categories, you're going to end up seeing the top charts, what you now see is much more of an editorially driven selection. So you've got the games that are popular scrolling along here. So, everything from Clash of Clans through to Score World Goals or whatever. But then beyond that, instead of the charts being very obvious and very visible, you kind of go for editor's choice first. So featured games, big name games, and then eventually you end up going towards each of the individual categories. And then just in general for the category chart, you have to click See All before you're even getting close to it. And this isn't necessarily the chart itself. In fact, as you can see, finding the chart for the category is pretty much impossible. And so what does this tell us? Well, what it tells us is that actually the old school technique of basically taking advantage of the likes of the category charts as a way of getting to the top of the App Store is slowly dying away. The category charts, as Apple have decided they're obviously not that useful, have been replaced by these. And so it becomes a case that you need to be more editorially featured to stand a chance of standing out. And so it really does sort of continue to stack up the importance of making sure you've got great content that the App Store is more likely to pick to feature within such a place as the Explore section. So this is kind of further evidence that you really need to be trying to make those connections at Apple, or you need to be making that game that really stands out. And then lastly, when we look at one last important thing, we can see some changes to the search that are important. So the first thing that's really important are these trending searches. So this is going to be different for every single country. So when you look at all of these apps, this is currently what the UK App Store is showing. But if you were to compare it right now with what the US Store was showing, you would end up seeing that they were a completely different selection of apps. And so this is a really interesting way of basically driving sort of contextual traffic. So if people are very interested in your app at a particular moment, they're more likely to search for it. So this should hopefully help people who are either creating seasonal content that's really interesting and driving new installs to the store, or for people who just generally are kind of looking at interesting new ways of basically getting their app out to the press or getting it featured on TV or getting it tweeted by a celebrity or whatever. So that's an interesting thing. But then when we go and look in further, there's another couple of interesting changes that can be found from the store. So if we end up looking at Angry Birds, what you'll end up seeing here is you'll see some changes to the way the ecosystem works. So as you can see, the top one, you've still got that one screenshot displaying, and with Angry Birds Rio, you've still got that there. But as you go through, you can see some changes. So first of all, if you've got the bundle, what you see is the 4 icons instead of a screenshot. So that's kind of interesting in itself. But perhaps the most interesting thing is when we reach Angry Birds Go and Angry Birds Star Wars, you can see that both of these are playable videos. And in fact, you can also see it for Angry Birds Epic as well. It's just that these playable videos are what people are going to end up seeing first and foremost. It's not the screenshots anymore. The number one asset that people are going to be seeing when they're searching for an app on the App Store is the video. So that's going to give you sort of a further idea of why this is important. It's going to be the first thing that people see. But beyond it being the first thing that people see, you can also see it when you see something else that's been featured in the list. So you go beyond Angry Birds Seasons, and what you end up seeing are games which don't have it. You know, you can see that Air Penguin, for example, are taking advantage of the fact that you can get 2 screenshots now featured instead of the single one. But beyond that, when you look at it, you've really got to say that these games look very unimpressive in comparison. And when you look at a screenshot and you look at these static screenshots and compare it to, say, something like this, where you can see the video, for example, on Angry Birds Epic, I think, again, you'll see the reason why something like Angry Birds Epic's video is going to be a lot more captivating than screenshots.
Fantasy Piggy Island, where silly costumes were fashionable and weapons were, how to put it, a bit different. Enter a new breed of hero in a game that's truly epic.
So yeah, as you can see there, video really does stand out, and it stands out for those 2 reasons that I've already outlined. One, because video just in general looks a lot more dynamic and interesting, and you can explain a lot more about the tone of your app using it. And number 2, it just makes it look better in comparison to those apps that don't have screenshots. And as one last little thought about changes in the App Store that are useful, you can see that editor's choice is quite clearly highlighted underneath the Angry Birds Epic star rating. So you can see that Apple have decided to take the step of making that a little bit more public, and in doing so, the hope really is that people will start to notice and take editor's choice much more seriously. So yeah, that's really it from the App Store, but that's not the only place you're going to be able to discover apps on your phone, and in particular you're going to be able to discover apps as a result of Spotlight Search. So people who use it can just quickly swipe down on their phone and it can basically pull up a load of stuff. So if we look for The Simpsons, what you're going to see is some of the changes. So what used to happen previously when you search for something like The Simpsons, all you would end up seeing is what was on your phone. Whereas now what you see, the top answers, as you can see, is Wikipedia and the App Store. So it looks across the web and across the App Store as a way of driving traffic. And so if you want to, and you're looking to basically find this Simpsons game in particular tapped out, you can just tap here, and it takes you over to the App Store page. So Spotlight Search has got this ability to basically drive traffic across from from people who are looking for stuff on their phone across to the App Store. But that's not the only thing that it can end up doing. And I mean, one of the major things that we need to think about when we are looking at this is the way that this search works. So The Simpsons worked there, but let's see if we put in this. So game featuring Homer Simpson. So we have this game featuring Homer Simpson search, which I think you would probably quite easily describe as Simpsons tapped down. And all it's come up with is search web or search Wikipedia. And that's basically where Spotlight Search falls down, is that you can see that phrases versus, the sort of the like of semantics, or putting in something like a question in the likes of Google, it's phrases that are always going to win, and stuff that very easily corresponds to exactly what the App Store keywords are basically going for. So Simpsons tapped out, if you go for Simpsons, it lines up. If you don't go for Simpsons, you get this. If you ask this kind of question, you don't end up getting the thing that you really want. So this is the sort of the problem with Spotlight Search. And you can see it in 2 other places on the phone as well. So the first one is that when you go to Siri, you can actually ask Siri to find you apps. And in particular, if you ask the right kind of questions, you can actually go and find them. Find me a puzzle app.
Okay, searching for me a puzzle on the App Store.
So what you can see there is that I've asked it to find me a puzzle app, and what it's actually done is it's ended up searching for me a puzzle, because the way that the search works in Siri's mind is that basically find an app are the kind of this sort of the beginning and end, and everything in the middle is what it ends up searching for. So if someone is searching using Siri to find an app, if they ask for something like that, if they use a colloquialism and it's not a very direct attempt to find something, then what you'll end up getting is this sort of weird results, which you still have got a puzzle app, but ultimately you've only pulled 472 results. So let's compare this. Let's jump back out and compare this if we just say the word puzzle app. Puzzle app.
Okay, searching for puzzle on the App Store.
And by doing that, what you end up getting is 44,000 results. So you literally get 10,000 times as many results simply by searching for the query puzzle app, as opposed to searching for the query which is find me a puzzle app. So as it ends up showing is that basically Siri is a way of driving app search. But again, you've really got to think hard about what phrases you're using. You've got to think very carefully about the way that you end up going and finding things. And when you're perhaps a user who's considering using Siri to maybe go and find yourself an app, it's not necessarily going to be at the forefront of your mind working all these things out. And so as the last place to basically go and see where you can discover things, you've pretty much got yourself in Safari. And in Safari, you can actually use this in exactly the same way as Spotlight Search. So if, for example, you search for XCOM, you can see that actually not only can you see the previous web results that I've looked for when I've been ending up researching and looking for XCOM and how to beat the game, you can also see that the App Store search comes up. So this has got a couple of positive things, is that actually Spotlight Search, I'd query how many people actually use Spotlight Search on a regular basis. But I think the likes of Safari, people will use very regularly. So if, for example, you are looking for advice on this game, perhaps this won't help you. But if you're generally looking for information about XCOM and you realise that actually you can download this on the App Store, then actually that could be a very useful and interesting way of engaging traffic. But as I've shown previously, and as I've shown previously within basically the Spotlight Search itself, it still suffers from the same problems that the Spotlight Search suffers from. So Alien Invasion game, for example, that would be a very strong description of what XCOM is about. It's actually, it is a game about alien invasions. And if you go through and search it and end up looking up and down these kind of things, you'll see that UFO Alien Invasion, which is basically the original XCOM, ends up kind of getting through into one of the search results. So it's one of those things that actually the kind of search that might perhaps surface a game is not necessarily going to end up driving traffic as effectively as you'd think, because it needs to be directly semantically focused. And so that's it from this video, really. There's probably some other things, that we'll end up sort of discovering as time goes on, but we'll keep on updating you whenever we spot anything that basically plays a part. And we'll probably look to do a few more of these videos to look into other areas of the ecosystem. But if you've enjoyed this, remember to like the video, leave the comment if you want to make sure you can have that opportunity to ask us a question or leave your opinion. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well, so you hear more from the business of apps. That's it from me. I'll see you soon.